All right. Hi, Mikhail.
Hi, Connie. Thank you for
Thanks.
having me.
Thanks for joining us here today. I'm very, very excited to learn about your expertise and be able to share this with people. So, just as we launch into this, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your expertise, what you do?
Okay, so I'm originally from Manila, Philippines. I completed a fashion design undergraduate program at Istituto Marangoni in Milan from 2015 to 2018. I had my own label called Last Triangle for 1 year. After that, I shuttered it during the pandemic. And since that time, I moved to the beautiful island of Siargao. Worked as a social media manager for a resort there while doing tarot readings and fashion design workshops. And
Oh my
after that,
gosh.
it led me here to Toronto.
I thought you were going to say the beautiful land of Toronto before, but no, there was a more beautiful island off the coast of the Philippines. Lovely. You've got a lot of interesting experiences with design and tarot reading. Tell me, how do you learn best?
Okay. I learned best first by reading. So I'm a voracious reader. You'll always find me reading a book. Um Everywhere from like while I'm commuting on the bus or streetcar or while I'm in a cafe. And it's usually about a subject I want to get good at. So there's that academic approach, but I think the best way is really experiential. Um, Even authors on the tarot will say the best way to get good at it is by doing it. So having a lot of readings under my belt has certainly helped me become competent at tarot reading.
So I have to ask, why tarot?
Okay, so I get that question a lot. So I still remember where it all started. It was 2008. I still remember. And there is this famous bookstore chain in the Philippines called Fully Booked, and they had a branch at a mall in Manila that had an in-house tarot reader. And I remember my mom and my sister went that year for a tarot reading. And afterwards, my sister decided to buy a tarot box set at the bookstore. And when she brought it home, I read the guidebook. And after that, it just never left.
And so, what do you consider to be your strengths?
I think my strengths include communication. So it's very important to be able to convey as accurately as possible the information that you get when you interpret the cards. So I consider that a strength. I also consider my intuitive abilities to be a strength. So that is harder to quantify, of course, but it's something you need when doing tarot readings.
Well, okay, this is where it gets interesting for me because I would have assumed that tarot reading was really mostly intuitive, with a little bit of background and then maybe some, I don't know, workshops or something to kind of, fine tune your
Yes.
intuition. But what you're telling me as well is that communication plays a really big role in this. The
Yes.
skill of communication plays a really big role in this. Um,
100%.
how have you noticed that in the tarot reading? Like, how does communication come into play in tarot reading?
Okay. It's how you present the information. So I think first of all, it's the tarot readers' philosophy does come out. So the way I understand tarot, for example, is that it presents very likely possibilities. Things are not as set in stone as is the common misconception, like with fortune telling and things like that. So that needs to come across in the language you use. So, for example, when I do tarot readings, I like to use words such as very likely, as opposed to will be, um,
Mhm.
to emphasize it as a possibility, and it doesn't take away the free will or the ability of the client to respond and choose.
So learning how to be so strategic with your communication, did that come to you naturally, or did you have to work on that?
Yeah, it's something I had to work on by reading books on the tarot and um, getting advice from more advanced readers. And then it's something you also intuitively like sense. And then here, I just remembered another important thing is how do you um, present information that's, for example, very good or what we would call very, very bad. Um, that's there's also a skill in being able to do that because if, for example, somebody asked about, let's say, the likely outcome of, let's say, a job interview, um, or something with acquiring something, and the indication from the reading is very positive, you also have to tell them that at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can slack off or that everything is prearranged. So, so you need to emphasize that effort or maintaining the
Mhm.
effort they currently are expending. um, so you need to emphasize that. And then with regards to, let's say, more negative outcomes, there is a way to present it without sugarcoating, but without also um, like destroying the morale of the client.
Okay, so tell me about a time when you had to deliver really something really negative to a client.
So I was doing a lot of short readings. There were people coming one after another. And this client asked about the the possibility of finding love, I think, within a specified time period. I don't know if it was 6 months or 1 year, but a specified
Okay.
time period. And I remember the outcome was like it was a strong no. And
Jeez.
and I was like, oh my gosh, it's not what he's going to want to hear. But I just said it, and he was like, yeah, it makes sense. And I already
Phew.
knew that the person had, you know, a degree of self-awareness and probably was in tune with like the general pattern of like where his life was headed. With regards to, let's say, clients who are the opposite, um, you just have to deliver it as, I guess, diplomatically as you can without diluting the essential meaning.
And tell me, so has there ever been a tarot reading that went terribly wrong?
One time I would just offer it to like someone. I was like, hey, I heard like you're at a crossroads. Would you like to do like a tarot reading? And then so we would do it. And it just it just didn't it just didn't work out. Like even for me, it wasn't clear, like in terms of the information I was getting. And the person seemed to disagree with a lot of things that I was presenting to them. Um, but here's the interesting thing. With regards to two incidences when that happened. So the first one, I remember I did that reading December 2018. The person reached out a year later or almost 2 years later and said that the reading was accurate.
Hmm,
And it also
interesting.
happened, yeah, it also happened with with the other one. So I think what I learned from that is one is okay, even if let's say it's not a reading where you're in a flow state where everything just seems to be um going well, like your intuition is sharp, everything seems to be clear, you don't have problems interpreting the cards. You just have to go through it and do it as best as you can. And then the second for me, I also learned after that is you have to at least make sure that the person you're offering it to is equally as interested, um, so that you're at least meeting halfway. And then there is also an energetic reason for why the person has to be interested. But that's another that's another discussion. Yeah.
That's delving a little bit away from the skills side
Yeah, yeah.
into something a little bit more metaphysical.
Yes, yeah.
So tell me, just so that I understand this clearly, what's the difference between tarot reading and fortune telling?
For me, fortune telling is the belief that everything is fated, everything is set in stone.
Mm.
What the cards reveal is something that is bound to happen. Whereas tarot reading, as I understand it, is about the possibilities, and more often than not, the very likely possibilities that will occur in the future based on what you have been doing and what you are doing at the present.
Even with that, I mean, it sounds like it's a very, you're very studied in what you do initially, or even now. Do you ever face imposter syndrome?
Sometimes you will wonder, like, especially, like, for example, I just did a tarot reading this morning from a returning client, and the client revealed that something I mentioned in our last reading last May came to pass. And sometimes you're gonna wonder, like, why? How? And then you're gonna take a step back and you're like, I mean, you always have to take a step back and you're gonna wonder, like, how, why does this even work? Is this even real? And then even when that happens, you do tend to doubt your abilities, like, and when, as I mentioned, when you have returning clients, people who've gone to you for 3 readings in the past, 4 readings, and they still come back, they still message you, asking for readings, you are gonna wonder, like, why. So yeah, I think imposter syndrome, it's always going to be there, but you just continue what you're doing. And I think one positive of imposter syndrome is it keeps you on your toes. It makes sure that you're not complacent. It You don't rest on your laurels, and that you keep learning, you keep improving, and you keep doing the practices that you're doing that enable you to be a good tarot reader. Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent, because I have never heard anyone talk about the positive aspects of imposter syndrome. I've never heard that in all the things, everything. I'm looking at my bookshelf, all the books that I've read. I've never, ever, ever heard that. How do you get better at being a tarot card reader?
I remember there's one competency in the Skill Pod book that comes to mind. It has to do with different kinds of thinking. So, in the context of tarot reading, you have to use different kinds of thinking. So, one thing that I think every practitioner needs to do is set aside time for meditation. Because meditation, when you know how to quiet the mind, it helps you identify if a thought is coming from, let's say, your more intuitive side,
Mhm.
or it's a more rational thought, or if it's just mental clutter. So also being able to meditate helps clear the space so that the more intuitive thoughts can arise, and then you're able to identify them. So that's one. Second is to learn from advanced practitioners. So one book that had an impact on me with regards to tarot reading is Josephine McCarthy's Tarot Skills for the 21st Century. Josephine is someone in the esoteric world who's highly respected and has more than 20 years of experience. So you to be good at tarot reading, you need to learn at the people who are at the top, who are the very best. And then I would say is also to do it. You just have to do it, which is also an advice of Josephine's in the book. You just have to do it. It's also good to keep a journal of the reading you did with person one, person two, what cards came out, what was your interpretation. So you can see also your level of accuracy. So I know there's a lot of subjectivity and there are things that are not so easy to quantify in tarot reading. But also at the end of the day, like an athlete, um, you need to see your percentage, kind of like your batting average.
Hmm.
What is your
Okay.
percentage of getting things right? And for me, it's very encouraging, for example, when I talk to returning clients and I ask them, let's talk about your last reading. What were the things that I mentioned, or what are the things that the cards mentioned that came to pass? What didn't? And when it's when the level of accuracy is high, then you know that you're doing something right. But of course, you always have to remain humble. That's what I was talking about with the imposter syndrome. Remain humble and just continue doing what you're doing and strive to get better at it.
Never met a tarot card reader before, and so this was super interesting, and really to understand the connection between the skills, even in something that seems so esoteric. That there really are sort of some foundational skills that can increase someone's confidence and understanding and ability to kind of grow within their professions. I think that's very interesting. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.